From the outset, our game against Club Brugge seemed a brilliant opportunity to rotate effectively, and in the end, I've left the game with a real excitement because I believe a lot of very interesting ideas popped up that, from a tactical perspective, Mikel Arteta will, I think, really be forced to consider. Arsenal are in pole position to qualify top of the Champions League group phase, but today's analysis is going to look at the bigger picture of the 3-0 win away to Bruges, looking at Madueke's possessed return, all of his actions against Bruges, and asking, can him and Saka play together? I'm going to cover Gabriel Jesus' infectious cameo and the extent to which we can rely on him this season. I'm going to tie a Viktor Gyokeres conversation into that, the bright cameos of Nwaneri and Calafiori in at left centre-back, and ask whether we can balance Martin Odegaard and Martin Zubimendi in the same team, and whether we actually should be doing that. Welcome back to the Harvey Gratian YouTube channel. I'm so glad you found us or are joining us once again. And I want to begin with Madueke, and with a quote that he said after the game. The bare minimum I need to give my team is threat. They need to give me the ball and think something can happen. Then, obviously, trying to score and be as decisive as possible. That's the next level I need to get to. In terms of being consistently decisive, I think I can reach that level. It almost sounds like a bit of a snippet from my scouting report on Madueke when I'm speaking about him being able to make something happen from nothing constantly. He said all the right things here, and all the right things of a player hungry and full of belief that he can succeed. And aware, I think, as well of the layers of detail he still has to add to his game, which I'm going to get onto. So let's break down his actions from the win. In the first half, where our only real penetration inside the Bruges block was when our right centre-back in build-up found either Merino or Miles moving at those diagonals, and how we find more of this balance between lots of players who want to have the build-up flow through them is one of the questions I'm going to try and answer later. But Noni provided the game-breaking moment to drive through the middle of the pitch, and we see the intention to isolate Madueke that we did have against Bruges, as well as those layers that he's adding to his wing play, receiving, facing inside now, being balanced and strong, waiting for the fullback to bite, shrugging off and driving, something more awkward and difficult for him to do when he's on the left wing, because his strong foot is the one closest to the defender. But then it's all about the setup and the strike. When those golf club legs swing correctly, Madueke looks deadly. But let's cast our minds back to what I said about Madueke earlier in the season and on his ball striking. When you create this much separation in such little time from your defender, you can afford to take an extra step to consolidate yourself. But with the speed he's going at, it's nearly impossible to get himself over the ball without losing balance. Look how he's leaning back. His foot feels a bit too far away from his head for me. And as it is cleared by Milenkovic, look how Madueke's trying to stop his momentum. It's about Madueke taking care, being consistently decisive in his own words. For his screamer against Bruges, I don't see these issues. I see someone who can generate power, and maybe that's to do with the angle of the shot, because I still think the reliability in ball striking with his crossing after a cut-in still needs to be found. On this note of being consistently decisive though, let's talk about shot choice as well. We can see the benefit of White's timing and threat on the overlap here to open up the inside gap, and Noni's earliness and timing of the shot are really nice as well. But can he slow down a bit more, I ask? Can Madueke make that decision to be a bit more unpredictable? Can he shoot on the reverse to the near post? His shot feels a little bit in between blasting it and whipping it, and I think it ends up just being a very comfortable height to save. But Madueke's relentless intensity, the volume of his actions, his capacity to generate so many of these shooting positions excite me so much. So, can we get Madueke and Saka into the same team? Albeit a small sample, this has been Mikel's approach so far, to move Noni to the left wing, to stretch the pitch widthways, and to give the left back, whether that's Calafiori or lewis-skelly, all this space to be their best selves closer to the middle. And it also gives us a different type of threat from the touchline in Madueke. If the fullback can't get touch tight to Noni on the left-hand side like I was just speaking about, and maybe we look to pin with our left back and the centre forward to help create this space for Madueke, he gathers wind in his sails so easily, which basically means he builds momentum quickly, and that's hard to stop, which is why he's such an explosive and reliable byline threat. If we can create that space to drive inside, he can do that as well, but he doesn't feel on the left quite as multifaceted. And I think the Saka move him to left wing debate has descended into anarchy before, so I won't quite go that far. But Saka is strong at almost any angle on the pitch, it feels like, doesn't it? And where Madueke kind of has to be on the left, go, go, go to affect the game, Saka can still change his speeds at will. Noni has created relationships and combined well with players on the left-hand side already, but Saka has the advantage of being whatever the game needs him to be, if that makes sense. So, on the left-hand side, he can be a carrier through pockets, or a more creative passer, someone who can stretch from wide or combine and be more goal-hungry and driving towards the middle. Regardless of how we think Saka would perform on the left versus the right wing, or whether this is actually better for the collective at times or not, any team, I think, with Madueke and Saka on either flank would benefit with them being able to switch sides. And I think if Mikel isn't open to more of a curveball solution like this with Saka already starting on the inside, or indeed having some minutes in the false nine that I know he's already potentially eyed up Nwaneri providing, then I'm actually open to more of a side-to-side fluidity between Madueke and Saka than I've probably been in the past. But I know we simply cannot overstate the importance of just having a great group of wingers. And this kind of depth, as we've seen, is becoming less and less of a luxury and more of a necessity. And to finish this section with another Madueke quote, the players want each other to do well, whether they're starting or not. It's all about the collective. And I think I speak for the collective when I say that I am so pleased to have Gabriel Jesus back on the football pitch. The best compliment I can give to Jesus after his cameo against Bruges is that whatever his physical level is going to be from now on, he still has the same effect on the football pitch. That may ultimately be more of a bite-sized impact from now, but when he's bouncing on his tiptoes, he's trying things, he's still panicking the opposition in a way only Gabriel Jesus can. And that includes, rather humorously, missing chances. But to what extent can Jesus genuinely help us from now on? That's probably going to play a role in what we do in the January transfer window. Because Jesus' very first involvement was making it stick, going long, chesting it down to Merino in part of a dynamic we've seen Jesus and Havertz create with each other. More on that in just a second though. But Jesus glued things nicely, instantly, so well. White connects with him here, and all you need to see that Jesus is still himself is that feel that he has on the bounce pass to Nwaneri, and how quickly Jesus has spun and is aggressively offering that run to attack the centre-back. And then he tries something audacious. This is instinctive. This is Jesus' brain still working at 1,000,000 miles per hour. I want to use this to speak about these kinds of vertical connections. Merino and Jesus, who times his drop pairs, Merino plays it into him and brings in Calafiori joining in from left centre-back. And Merino now becomes the guy arriving off him. And in the Gyökeres scouting report, I remember speaking about how I wasn't actually too keen on using Gyökeres and Havertz together in this kind of dynamic. And that's a dynamic that Mikel has at least hinted at the possibility of in some of his press conferences before. Havertz drifting off Jesus is still the partnership that I would prefer in this dynamic, and I want to speak about why that is. We saw this in pre-season, Havertz being that kind of back-to-goal fighter, and Merino, after winning the ball back himself, is ahead of the game, sliding into position for Havertz's flick and firing a first-time shot into the corner. First and foremost, to make Gyökeres this kind of bounce pad doesn't feel right for him, but I'm also not keen on him being the guy moving off a Jesus, a Havertz, a Merino, whoever's in the centre forward. Some will argue against that, I think, but in this role, my defence would be you're kind of still forced, even though you're this arrival guy, you're still forced to do midfieldery things, to think like a midfielder, to help out in the build-up, to be selfless in your movement at times, and I also still want to see more of Gyökeres showing that he can get shots off this snappily. you also have to take into consideration the balance of the pairing itself. Havertz isn't a particularly unsettling dribbler, but if he was paired with a Gyökeres, where is, you have to ask, the Jesus chaos? When it drops in these little gaps and there isn't a clear shot, you have to be able to weave your way through. Going back to the Eze scouting report, it's the main reason I remember saying that I felt a Rodrigo made sense if he was going to give us some of those Jesus things in central areas. And in this kind of duo, I think you realistically want to change roles relatively seamlessly. And I think in a Gyökeres and Havertz kind of pair dovetailing each other, we'd be lacking that unpredictability personally. I realise Gyökeres still warrants a video individually himself, but a few words on him. I'll start with saying last night the front line suited a false nine. That's at least worth keeping in consideration. And when we're speaking about duos, and Merino here was already in the kind of lower touch, higher impact role, which left us already pretty disconnected in these central pockets, unable to, I think, make those quick connections and take advantage of Gyökeres leaning off the last line, as we did at times before his injury. There's also the factor with how we use the right centre mid, with Odegaard exclusively dropping to the right hand side. We left this pocket free to isolate Madueke, but also for others to arrive into. And we also didn't have quite those Odegaard movements further to the left-hand side to open up those earlier balls in behind to Gyökeres. It's also worth noting that the rhythm Gyökeres found before his injury was genuinely good. It was sticking more for him. The first touch was secure, and hence there was less fighting, less energy wasted, and quicker follow-up actions. I'll also repeat how I still see, and always have seen, Gyökeres as just another great option up front for us. Injuries have given him a different role, and as some of you who I think watched the scouting report may remember, I was well aware of the limits to Gyökeres' game, but I did still expect it to be much easier for him to separate himself from defenders than he's managed so far. There's also the conundrum which Billy Carpenter, as always, so go and check him out, sharply articulates here, is that the defenders Gyökeres is clearly superior from, in terms of a physical standpoint, are often the ones who are low and stacked in the box, where he finds it trickier naturally. Ironically, the solution here is you probably play him with a more selfless twin up front, but I'll save all my other considerations for a video whenever I get round to it down the line. But I think it is safe to say that everyone, Gyökeres included, will be better off when players return and when his role in the squad as part of a team is more easily definable. I want to finish with the cameos of Ethan Nwaneri and Riccardo Calafiori at left centre-back. I'll start with Ethan, and I'll say it, I thought he deserved to start against Bruges, but I want to begin with a conversation of, or about, our midfield balance. And for me, there have been valid concerns, as I've brought up myself, on how Zubimendi and Odegaard relate with their touches. But that's also more about the roles they and others are given on the day. As I've repeatedly said, Zubimendi doesn't just balance Odegaard's deeper movements, or deeper movements of any player, but as we saw against Bruges again, he is additive when he goes into these higher pockets. He gives us qualities and an elusiveness as well that we didn't have there before. But what sometimes is more significant are the dominoes that fall elsewhere. Lewis-Skelly was another body who wanted to be city and receiving deep against Bruges, which makes it kind of a necessity that your left centre mid, as we've touched on, is kind of that second striker. There aren't too many better than Odegaard when he's mixing our speeds lower and he's looking to split with these kinds of passes. But if that's the only way we can create that kind of option for him to do that, we begin to look a bit more shortchanged again, and well, we're going to build up a bit more predictably once more. Against Brentford, I remember saying in my analysis, I thought and still believed we balanced things in the setup of the team pretty much as well as we could with the players on the pitch and still allowing Rice to have that kind of more all-encompassing role and not just keeping him above the ball like we have done before against deeper defences. But I think what this all has taught us is that, well, we're not now in a place where we need all of our possession to go through Odegaard. We have multiple means of progressing the ball. And I think as a corollary of that, not only will that make Odegaard more dangerous himself, but can we take some of his deeper swings and change them more into those movements on top, more central, further left, that we did see at times against Brentford, but not so much against Bruges, again for the balance reasons that I've already spoken about. And I maintain that we've also moved past the point where we have to play Odegaard in every single game, in every single minute, and I think Nwaneri showed that against Bruges to actually look at his performance now. I think at times it is easier to strike that midfield balance when you have Ethan starting in the higher pockets straight away, and from here he has the ability to impact the game in different ways and to move different ways. He can add a body deep, yes, and he isn't someone who always has to drop all the way out of the block, because as he's developing and maturing physically, he's developing under contact. He can slow things down more, absorb and spin, meaning not every action has to be played so fast. There are the rotations that he has with Bukayo Saka, this ability to change the tempo of a game with a combination, or get those feet shuffling quickly towards the goal when he receives higher up, and able to wrap a shot towards goal with a moment's notice. I think he looked really mature and in control against Bruges, and I want to see more Mikel. And finally, Riccardo Calafiori, who kick-started that last Nwaneri chance by stepping in front of his man from left centre-back. Those potential defensive improvements we've spoken about on the channel with Ricky, in terms of picking the right battles, approaching the touchline on better lines. These are all going to help him at left centre-back too, where I think he already reads the game much better from these central positions. For a Calafiori and a Hincapié, though, those centre-backs who like to bite in, to step ahead, they're always going to be better alongside a William Saliba. But with how well I believe Calafiori defends the box too, I think the left centre-mid cameo that Mikel gave him shows a real consideration for Mikel to use him there, period, especially in Gabriel's absence. And I think from everything I've seen so far from Hincapié, I can see why he looks set to become a truly amazing left centre-back, but an amazing left centre-back that's tucked in from left-back, if that makes sense. And even though you're taking Calafiori away from his left-back role where he just hunts constantly for spaces to roam into, he gives still a different edge to our build-up from left centre-back, whilst keeping, actually, a lot of what he does already. Let me show you what I mean. I'm sure we're all going to remember multiple instances when Calafiori has stepped through a press from left centre-back as it jumps onto us, becoming totally free and maybe kick-starting a transition. I think we have to see a bigger sample of what his blend of progression and security are like when progressing around the back, and whether he can be too intent on progressing at times, I don't know. But there's no doubt that technically I think he is our strongest option in the squad at left centre-back. And he still picks his moments to be more Calafiori in the middle and final third too, particularly when we're set in possession. Don't worry so much about the personnel in this example. It's a mix of what we saw against Bruges and just purely vibes. But with a Hincapié or a lewis-skelly at left back, it's a natural rotation with Calafiori for them to come in and sit deep in the left centre-back or deep left centre midfield zone, whilst Calafiori arrives on the underlap or outside the left wing, depending on the who around him. There are lots of different options to balance him and drop into the back line, and we know how impactful Calafiori is too on the counter-press around an opposition box. The primary objective, though, as of now, is to get healthy bodies back. But when, or should I say if, that does happen, I think the win against Bruges showed we have so many ideas, and hopefully plenty of trusted ideas, to continue to rotate this squad effectively. And there are a few questions for Mikel himself, I think, to answer re the squad building. I don't want things to become one-dimensional again. Against Wolves, I think there's a really good chance that we see Rice return to the six with two interiors ahead of him and with Zubimendi rested, a template that we experimented briefly with against West Ham before Odegaard's injury. But let's now begin to build again, and that starts with Wolves, and hopefully a few more players are going to be available or at our disposal in the future. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed this analysis. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye for now.